Hi, welcome to Just Cook with Michael. Today we're going to make a chicken ragu with polenta. This dish will have the cornmeal, which is the base for our polenta, some diced tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, some pulled chicken. I roasted a chicken and pulled the meat off. Sometimes you could buy pulled chicken like this, or you could buy one of those chickens that's already pre-cooked like at Costco or your typical grocery store and pull it off yourself. One onion, which I'm going to caramelize, and some cream cheese that I'm going to mix into the polenta. This dish will also have chicken stock, and I'm going to make a little bit of roux, which is a thickener that's made out of equal parts butter and flour. One of the reasons I like this dish a lot is because, well, polenta is so easy to make. If you can make oatmeal, you can make polenta. And just like oatmeal could be very plain, or it could be incredibly dressed up and made delicious with apples, nuts, butter, cream. Same thing with polenta. You can make it just out of the box. It's basically just cornmeal, plain salted water, and that is it. So that's the pretty plain style. You could do stuff like today. I'm going to mix in some cream cheese that kind of gives it a softer texture. This is also, I'm going to make what I call hot polenta, like a mush, to almost make like a bowl the way you would for like mashed potatoes, and put that chicken ragu or chicken stew on top. You could put any type of stew dish on top of this, and it's delicious. You cook polenta, you could dress it up with sauteed mushrooms and butter, especially like things like porcini mushrooms or morels, creminis. Make a mushroom mixture, make your polenta, then mix in the saute the mushrooms in a separate dish and mix it in. Put in onions, different cheese at the very end, like right before you're going to serve it. If you're serving it hot, you can mix in some cheese, and that's delicious. Sometimes I put a little cream in the water to make it a little richer. Also, I'm calling this hot polenta or mush polenta because it's going to be served almost immediately, then the stew will go on top. You also could make polenta where it's the same recipe as that's on your cornmeal box or what I'm going to make today, and you just put it on a cookie sheet pan and flatten it out almost like you would like a brownie mixture, and then just let it cool for a few hours, and then it becomes very firm, just like a brownie, and you could cube it up or make it diamond shapes or cookie cutter shapes, whatever you want, and then serve that. You could grill that when it's cold. You could saute it and put things on top like chicken stew or sauteed mushrooms or sometimes sausages. It's just so versatile. It's so easy to keep around the house, cheap, extremely easy to make. Most people are impressed with it, but it's probably one of the simplest dishes to make in the kitchen. I'm going to use some chicken stock. So I'm just going off the recipe on the back of the box, which is about 3.5 cups of water, teaspoon of salt, and 1.25 cups of cornmeal. So this is my chicken stock. If you don't have chicken stock, you could add the chicken bouillon into your water. You can make it with just water and salt. Definitely chicken stock or beef stock is much better. Okay, the first part of this dish, I am going to caramelize some yellow onion. I caramelize it just, everybody loves caramelized onions, roasted onions. The sugars come out in the onion and just give it such a delicious flavor. And it adds quite a bit to stews. So first, for this application, I'll cut it in half there. Cut out the little root node on the bottom. And you can cut this to whatever size you prefer. The application I'm going to do today, I'm going to cut them in little wedges, little half-inch wedges here. Already making me cry a little bit. The only thing I found that helps with that is work fast. The colder I think the onion is, the better. So if you keep it in the fridge. Also, sometimes like a little fan maybe if you're doing tons of onions. Okay, for this part of the dish, we're going to make roux. So a roux is just a thickening agent used to thicken sauces, soups. The main reason you do this, if you threw flour directly into a sauce, it would clump up. What actually happens here is the butter, the fat from the butter, incorporates every little grain or covers every little grain of flour. Therefore, when you put the flour into your sauce, it will just disperse evenly and it won't clump up. So extremely important to not have clumpy sauces. With gravy, sometimes they'll do this like with bacon grease and flour, but it's a very common technique. For Creole cooking like gumbo, they make a very dark roux. They'll use the same process, but they'll they'll let the flour cook longer in here to give it a dark, rich flavor. The darker you make the roux, the less thickening power it does have, it becomes less potent. And the reason you want to cook it a little bit is to get that starchy taste cooked out, or else it's just going to taste like raw flour. That's why you cook it just, well, I'm going to just cook it a little bit. What I'm making, sometimes they would just refer to as like a blonde roux, just lighter color, just cook for a few minutes. It's a little hot, so I'll turn that way down. And this could cook anywhere from maybe 2 minutes to 5 minutes. But basically, again, you're just cooking out the starch. Say if this was going into a soup or what we're doing, you could go right at this hot point and dump it right in your soup and whisk it in. I'm going to set this aside and let it cool off a bit. That's another thing with roux. In very busy kitchens, we used to make a few pounds of this at a time and just keep them around the refrigerator, you know, they would last weeks, and just break off a little chunk of roux whenever we were thickening up a sauce. So you definitely can make this ahead of time. And it actually tastes pretty good. Set that off to the side, letting it cool off. Now I am going to caramelize the onions. Again, for caramelized onions, you need a pretty hot pan. Anything that's caramelizing or turning brown has to be over 350 degrees. That's why things don't turn brown in water or when you steam them, because it's only getting up to the temperature of water, which is 212. Or in microwaves are working by vibrating water molecules. That's why you're not getting browning in a microwave. So just to keep that in mind, if you're ever cooking in an oven and you don't want your turkey to be any darker or your croutons, turn the heat below 350, something like 300 or high 200s, and it should still cook, but it shouldn't caramelize to a darker color anymore. I'll put in a little olive oil. The pan is already getting a little hot. Then I will dump in my onions. Another key here is not to do too much at once. Like, this is about the max load you want on this pan. This pan could get really hot, so I have it on the highest setting. Because if you put too much, you overload the pan. There's not enough BTUs from the flame, and you end up steaming the onions, which again is not going to give it they're not going to caramelize. They're going to steam, which is a totally different flavor. So this actually takes a while. You know, I could see this taking about 10 minutes, so just take your time. Just stir it, you know, every few minutes. And, you know, first it'll go to be a translucent color to the onions becoming very limp, and then they'll slowly start to take on color. And again, it just adds a lot of richness to a dish, or like French onion soup, you would definitely want to do this technique. Okay, it's probably been about 6 minutes so far. You can see they're starting to take on color. Probably has at least another 5 minutes. Trust me, your patience here is well worth it. And you'll want to season these with maybe like a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to taste. Again, season a little bit, taste it, see what you think, add a little more if you think it needs a little more. Even sometimes if you're just learning, I recommend, you know, tasting the raw onion. Then after, when it's halfway cooked like this, pulling that out, save a piece of the raw onion, wait till the end till it's fully caramelized, and compare the flavors of the three. It's a great way to see what different cooking techniques could do for a dish. And sometimes you want that pungent flavor from a raw onion. For example, sometimes when I make guacamole, I'll finely dice like some red onion. And because the guacamole, the avocado has so much natural fat, that sharpness, pungent flavor from the onion really adds a good balance to the avocado. Every technique has its time and place. Okay, these onions are looking nice and caramelized. That looks pretty good. I'll put in about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to put in my diced tomatoes. I'm going to put in about a 1/2 cup of chicken stock. Again, you could use some chicken bouillon. If you have no stock, you could add a little bit of water. I'm going to put in my chicken. That's about a 1/2 pound of pulled chicken. Now I'm going to put in some cherry tomatoes. These cherry tomatoes are more for garnish. That's why I'm kind of putting them in at the end. A lot of times if I make tomato sauce, I either like to cube up fresh tomatoes or use some like cherry tomatoes like this, just to gives it a little different look, a little different texture to bite into. It looks really good on the dish. And you can see this is pretty watery. So that's where the roux is going to come in. So I will get this roux, and it's still fairly warm. That's why, if this was in the refrigerator, it would harden up. But I'm going to put about half of it in first. Stir it in. And again, because I made a roux, you don't have to worry about it clumping up. It'll evenly distribute throughout your stew or chicken ragu. And already in the middle here, where I first put in the ragu, I could tell it's a little thicker. And we put in about half a teaspoon of black pepper. And this looks really good. Again, it's close, but that looks really good. Could put a tiny bit more roux in it. It's definitely good to do a little bit at a time. And it does probably take about anywhere from 2, I would say, to 5 minutes if you're constantly stirring for the roux to have its effect. It's not immediate. So that is a little thicker. I'll put just a tiny bit more roux. Again, it looks like what I made was about the right amount. So I'll put that all in. And that is it. That looks delicious. Sure, if you could tell, that's definitely a little thicker than it was. Again, you don't want it to be a paste. You just don't want it to be runny like water. So it doesn't take a lot of roux. Sometimes if you didn't want to go through the roux process, you could do a tiny bit of cornstarch and water. You mix that up in a little bowl and then add it in. So that is done. The last part is the polenta, because again, it's served hot, almost more hot style, or sometimes it is called mush when it's served hot like this. I put a little bit of salt because, again, all this polenta we're putting in doesn't have any salt at all. As soon as you put into polenta, you want to be stirring while you are dumping it in because it can clump up. Definitely probably should use a whisk, if not maybe a fork, but you want to work fairly fast. Again, it's not too hard, but just keep on stirring, especially in the beginning. And it'll, like, I'm going to already turn this way down because it'll start to bubble like lava in a little bit. And it probably only takes about 5 minutes for cornmeal to cook. So again, super fast dish. Okay, kind of try to work out all these clumps. After you get to a certain point, it gets so thick the whisk almost becomes useless. So I'll go to a spatula. Here's my spatula. So this is turned down fairly far, not that much heat, and I'll just let it go for about 5 minutes. And this isn't an exact science. I mean, to me, this seems a little thick. I'm actually going to add just maybe a couple tablespoons of water. And again, you could serve it just like this. You could now get some sauteed mushrooms that you sauteed on the side and dump them in there. Onions, sausage, ground up sausage that's already cooked. The cream cheese just adds kind of some richness. It also gives it a little bit of a tang. So I like it a lot. If you don't prefer that, leave the cream cheese out. Sometimes I think some cooks will use mascarpone cheese. It just tends to be a lot more expensive. Okay, that's been cooking for about 5 minutes. I have my ½ pound of cream cheese. It's kind of cubed up a little bit, but it's going to come out in one big clump, and that cream cheese will start to melt in there. So just incorporate it into your polenta. All right, that's looking pretty well incorporated there. Again, with this dish at the end, if you wanted to sprinkle in some Parmesan cheese, any kind of cheese up top would be really good. I'll show you what this looks like. So here you have it, your finished dish, polenta with a chicken stew or chicken ragu. I also have some roasted or sauteed broccoli I have on the side here with bacon. I'll show you how to make this in the next video, or you just could have it plain with just a polenta and the chicken stew, or dress it up however you want. If you want to put spinach around, have a spinach border, mushrooms, great on top of this, Parmesan cheese. Super easy. Polenta is super easy, super cheap, easy as making oatmeal. Thanks for joining me on Just Cook with Michael. Now you can make this dish too. Non più tra i farfalloni amoroso, notte e giorno di